The Attorney General Andrea Campbell is now joining us. Hello, Attorney General. How are you?
I'm doing great, thank
Where
you.
were we stuck in traffic?
Sorry.
Mass Pike?
No, 93.
Oh, 93, okay.
Yeah.
Can't you do something but sue somebody? Can't you do something but that?
Okay, I can.
Okay, fine.
Yeah.
Yes, traffic. The
So-
bane of our existence.
So, Attorney General, I don't know if you heard that was a mother that was calling that was saying
Yeah.
she was against, she thought this was going too far, that she wanted her child to have the ability, as apparently her poor kid did during a false alarm of a shooting, to be able to
Framingham, yeah.
get in touch with the parents, text them or say that, she loved them and that kind of thing. And that's the argument you hear from parents all the time when we have these discussions.
Mm-hmm.
Now, you put together this bill, and you want cell phones to be pretty much banned in schools. So address what
Yeah.
that mother just said and why you feel the way you do about getting rid of the cell
That's
phones.
right. So we heard that concern. We were very thoughtful. We engaged parents. We've engaged young people, even as a part of our office's new Youth Advisory Council. We now have a council informing the work that we do on behalf of young people, which doesn't often happen in government, various stakeholders, and we continue to engage folks. But the purpose of this bill is to address a couple of things. One is the mental health epidemic that we're seeing in Massachusetts, in this country. The uptick in anxiety, depression of our young people, that I think is the issue of the day. In addition to that, bullying and harassment also being used on these various devices in school to harm other kids. This is what we had to respond to. So the bill says we're going to ban cell phones within schools and frankly leave it to the adults to do public safety, not the kids. And further, educators are supporting us. Why? Because they don't want to be the cell phone police. They want a distraction-free environment to teach, and our kids should have a distraction-free environment in which to learn, while the adults do the public safety work and everything else. But we're not just banning cell phones. We also knew it was important that our litigation against TikTok and all this and various social media companies, so TikTok, Meta, Instagram, for the harms they are causing our young people in mental health, with respect to mental health, that takes years to get reforms through litigation. So we filed this legislation, the Study Act, to include accountability measures for social media companies. So when they say we're keeping your kids safe, well, age verification, sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. Infinite scrolling, they have designed these apps to keep our kids addicted. We want to hold them accountable to that, so the legislation also includes provisions there. And then lastly, it requires school districts to actually educate our kids on the benefits of social media platforms and then the harms, while we would look for ways to help fund this work with our school districts so they don't have to do it on their own. So it's comprehensive, because at the end of the day, to your point, Jim, and to others that we've engaged with, if we do not do something about these addictive devices with addictive platforms on those devices, 10 years from now, forget 10 years, maybe 1 year or 5 years from now, the uptick in depression, self-harm that we see amongst our kids will only get worse. They will not be able to learn in our classrooms, and the bullying and harassment that we're also seeing will also probably increase. And I don't know about anyone else. I'm a mom of 2 boys, not just AG. I would hope that we would want effective and impactful solutions, not surface-level BS, to respond to what we're seeing for our kids.
I have one more follow-up question. But before we do, let me remind people, if you want to speak directly to the Attorney General, it's 877-301-8970. Or if you're at the library and you want to speak to her face-to-face, Nia and Nicole, our colleagues, are sitting right over there. If you go over to them, tell them what your question is, there's a fairly good chance. My one follow-up, I'm not unclear about the reporting on this. Your study acting is very comprehensive. It mentions a ton of things beyond the bell-to-bell ban. Is that what the Senate advanced, or was it narrowly the cell phone ban?
It was the cell phone ban.
Just this one piece?
This one piece, and they may have included some other exceptions we're reviewing, but we're still at it, pushing the Senate and others, because for me, when we put forth the legislation, yes, banning cell phones was one piece of it, but the social media platforms and accountability for those platforms, it can't be the parents that do it. It has to be them, the way they design it, is equally important. So we'll continue to work with them as well as the House on this.
Attorney General, one more thing on this. What is the active shooter argument? We're getting it on text messages now, and I think her name was Natasha, the mother that called, worried about what her little girl would have endured without being able to call her family. What is your answer to the active shooter concern?
that's why we have law enforcement. That's why we have folks even in my office. That's why we have trainings and protocols. God forbid something like that happens, for adults and others to follow and to allow their kids, one, to immediately, forget get on the phone, exit the building and hopefully engage their parents immediately, but protocols in place to keep our kids safe physically and then to get them to their loved ones. I think we can have both, but we cannot require and expect our kids to be doing public safety protocol, protecting their own mental health from social media companies, tasking teachers with enforcing cell phone policies in some school districts that have, some that don't. So we need consistency, but we also need a response that is effective. And I don't know any parent of any age probably at this point, and I have younger kids, where you're not concerned about the prevalence of technology and our kids walking down the street even on their phones, so addicted that it's having an effect on their mental health. And in order for us to address that, there are solutions. And some of those solutions vary, including our litigation, but the STUDY Act is one such solution.
Let's go to Paul in Marblehead. You're on with the Attorney General, Andrea Campbell. Hey there, Paul.
Yeah, hi, Jim. Thanks for taking my call.
Sure.
Andrea, I'm a Marblehead resident, and as you know, yesterday Marblehead voted to be in non-compliance with the MBTA 3A Act. I just wondered what your plans were with regards to sanctions for the town now, especially with the July 14th deadline looming.
Thank you, Paul, for the question. Obviously, was disappointed to see that result. I know it was a close one. So a couple of things. We continue to work with municipalities to make it crystal clear to them that the MBTA communities law is mandatory and it is not an unfunded mandate. The courts have made that crystal clear. We'll continue to provide that technical assistance, Paul, to the teams who are working on these issues in that community and others, and push for compliance. But I actually want to take a step back, because the MBTA communities tool is only one tool in the toolbox to allow us to address the housing crisis we're seeing in this state. And with the chaos and confusion coming from the federal government, housing development is slowing down. Even the tariffs conversations, you have folks looking to build affordable housing in Massachusetts, and they're calling the Canadian border on the cost of steel, rising construction costs. You name it, it is now becoming even more difficult for our state to meet our housing needs. So to house young families, elders who want to downsize, students who have talent, who come here, who want to stay here, or even employers who are looking to house their employees, or developers who want to bring about good projects, that's becoming more difficult. So the MBTA Communities Law is one tool that we said we have to maximize our office's role in bringing about that solution. But if we don't get our act together, stakeholder by stakeholder, community by community, we're suddenly going to have a Massachusetts that looks very different from the current neighborhood in which you live. It's going to be more available for those who have a lot more money. In addition to that, an economy that will suffer. You can't have a functioning economy if you don't have housing and a range of housing for our people. So I would push the town to continue to think about what happened yesterday. And then I'll circle back. We've always wanted to work in collaboration with communities, not bring a hammer to every situation. But we also have a responsibility, and I do, to enforce the law. So we'll evaluate and review what happened last night and go from there.
And by the way, you should say, you've won every lawsuit.
That's
the
exactly
underlying
right.
thing, the unfunded mandate, essentially the state's position has been upheld. Before we go, Paul, thanks for the call. Before we go back to the calls, could you, and since you mentioned tariffs, could you give us like a 30-second response to what Trump signed into law last Friday? What's your reaction to the budget reconciliation, big, beautiful, it's not a bill anymore, big, beautiful law, I guess it
the
is
big,
now.
beautiful law that is tragic. It's heart-wrenching. So we are still evaluating. I think the bill is now over 1,000 pages, so we're obviously in the weeds on that. But people are going to lose their health care, simple as that. Some of the funding that goes to healthcare and other types of organizations that provide services to our most vulnerable, they're going to lose that. Food assistance and food to elders or families, people are going to lose that. And some of it will happen in the short term where people will feel that pain, and others will feel it in the long term. And what's worse is the deficit is going to go up by trillions, even though they said this is something they wouldn't want to do, but yet they're doing it. And now I think the estimate was $4 trillion, while not helping people, not advancing our economy, and certainly not making us more competitive. And I think you saw the back and forth. And it was sad that people didn't exercise courage, right? Some Republicans did and said, I'm just going to give up my seat. Good for you. Because at the end of the day, our jobs are to serve the people and be accountable to the people. How do you go back to your district and explain that your Medicaid benefits are going to suddenly be gone? And so sadly, people are going to feel the brunt of that. We're still evaluating the impact on Massachusetts, but it will affect hundreds of thousands of people, make them more poor and more vulnerable, which is in total opposition of the work of our office and the AGO to help move people out of poverty, help grow their wealth, and frankly, make their lives better. And so we're fighting the fight on a whole host of fronts, but everyone should be concerned about that bill, and they'll learn in more short order the impacts it will have here as we do a deeper dive on the thousands of pages, or over 1,000 pages that we still have to review.
Well, Attorney General Campbell, you've got a lot of lawsuits going against the federal government. Tell us what they are. I know you're involving education cuts and saving Job Corps, but what are the ones you think are most important?
A ton. So obviously in pushing back, and we made our concerns known to our federal delegation about that bill that passed and the incredible harms it would have on our folks here. And I think it's a reminder to folks, I, as their Attorney General, will do everything I can to fight for our residents and our economy. But this is where voting really matters, the outcomes of elections. So I would encourage folks to be civically engaged in this moment in time to vote, to encourage others to vote, and to get involved in elections in other states too. On our front, we're fighting every single day, and it is sad and tragic. Most of our work is focused on the funding issues, the unlawful cuts by this administration when it comes to education, mental health grants, teacher grants, everything having to do with public health. But I'll lift up just, I think, the NIH lawsuits, because NIH lawsuits, it's billions of dollars, the #1 funding agency at the federal level to every state in the country for biomedical research, clinical trials, advancing research that will help us address PTSD, adult cancer, pediatric cancer, Alzheimer's. Massachusetts is at the forefront of all of that in this country and internationally. You cut that funding. We've had to file 2 lawsuits on this, and we've won both so far. You cut that funding. What does that mean? You cut a clinical trial for a young kid going for pediatric cancer. It's not like going to the gym and you missed an appointment with your trainer. You miss one trial in a clinical trial, it's game over. You have to start something over again if your body is ready and prepared to do another clinical trial. So this is life and death for residents who live here. And in addition to that, life and death for our economy, because our economy relies on academic institutions and our higher ed institutions. You saw BU recently have to make some really tough choices because of the chaos and confusion. So we're fighting to protect access to federal funding. Much of that funding has been turned on, including NIH funding, but the chaos and confusion inserted in the process disrupts our economy, undermines it. People lose their jobs, and people can lose their lives. And I don't know that we'll fully have wrap our head around what's at stake until we have sort of more time to grapple with the harm and the outcome. So I see this as an opportunity to be unapologetic in our advocacy and do it with a sense of urgency in protecting our people and our economy.
Before we get back to the calls, I have one quick follow-up to Marjorie's question about lawsuits. Do you view the Supreme Court of the United States as just a conservative, right-leaning court, or a court that is totally in the tank to the President of the United States?
I have real concerns. You know, I was down there for our birthright citizenship case to protect birthright citizenship, which has been the law of the land for 150 years, and really lifts up the power of immigrants to this country, and how they're trying to target babies, right, to advance an immigration policy. And I thought the engagement between the justices was very thoughtful. Of course, we then got that decision, which was disappointing because they could have went further with it, but they didn't. Wasn't a complete loss. We just had to go back to the lower court and frankly, get a new order.
Well, it was a pretty big win for him, even if it wasn't a complete loss on the merits of birthright citizenship.
Well, I actually think it was more, I actually think it was not as bad as people thought. I know he was running out there saying we sort of won. It's like, actually, no, because we went in saying universal injunctions for everything across the country you have to be careful with. But I think the recent decisions, right, on curriculum decisions in our public schools, for example, or in our schools, it has been decades of legal precedent and previous decisions that give school districts the flexibility to determine their curriculums for their kids. And so you have all of these stays of different orders by the court where the court is offering no explanation, no signature, you don't know what their rationale is, why they're deporting certain people and they're not. That's what is unacceptable to me. We should be tasked with transparency, sharing with the public whatever our legal rationale is as to why we make a decision. And right now you're not seeing that. So it does jeopardize and undermine the whole entire system when we talk about institutions that are accountable to the people, accountable to the Constitution. I have real concerns about the politicization of the court, and everyone should.
You know, you were talking about deporting people, and I know you've said that your hands are tied to a large extent because ICE has the power to do a lot of the things that they're doing in terms of deporting people.
Because of the federal government's authority with respect to immigration and overseeing ICE.
But there was a story, a report by the Associated Press about this Iranian mother who'd been in the country for 47 years, and she was following the rules. She had been allowed to stay as long as she checked in regularly with immigration authorities, and she did. And she was detained nonetheless. And Steve Scalise, who's a big deal, Republican House Majority Leader, people may remember, he's most famously poor guy got shot a few years back and had a very miraculous recovery. But in any case, he stepped in, big deal politician, to get her out. And I thought, well, what does this mean? That, you know, ICE is saying they can take away anybody, and it doesn't matter that she was a good citizen, it doesn't matter she's been here 47 years, tough. Except he stepped in. So that's kind of something.
So this ability to fight back and what we're seeing from ICE, they're saying it's all in the name of public safety. We're saying that is not true. It is fear-mongering in our communities. If you have masked agents walking around our communities, wreaking havoc, pulling people out of their cars in broad daylight, picking up folks who have active asylum applications, or, to your point, are checking in regularly with the immigration agencies in their respective communities, following the timeline to try to obviously become a citizen of this country, and they're still being detained. So it's not public safety, it is fear-mongering. The challenge is, how do we hold them accountable when the federal government has significant authority over ICE? I have significant authority over the state police, right? If we showed up in the way in which they have been in different communities, I would have to do a press release and a press conference to answer questions. People are now pushing the U.S. Attorney's Office to answer some questions in others. And so we're doing our part to advocate. So what does that look like? We put out guidance so people can know what to expect if they are detained. We're helping people get lawyers in real time. We're helping people get bond for some of the most egregious cases. We're fighting for due process, as we did in the Rumesa case. The tough student who was here lawfully should have never been detained. Good luck trying to hold ICE accountable for that detention. It's very difficult because the federal government has such significant authority here. So we can still fight for due process. We can still show up in court to support a Rumesa to get her out. But that's what's sad, is that we have to do it sort of case by case by case. That's difficult because we have an administration whose policy is not to go after criminals. It's actually to go after anyone who is an immigrant and in the process violate their rights. So we're getting at lawyers and doing the best we can, but it is disappointing and heart-wrenching. We obviously had the high school student in Milford that was picked up. He's not on the radar of anyone in law enforcement. He was heading to a sports practice, about to graduate from high school, and they picked him up and had no remorse or compassion or empathy after the fact. And the conditions in which they're housing people are also concerning. So we're doing our part in my office to support lawyers, get folks to sort of have a rapid response with many agencies. But it's difficult, and again, that's what the other point I made earlier. Elections have consequences, sadly. Who's in the White House, it determines how they're going to use our federal resources. I'd prefer they use it to go after criminals and not folks who are who are not committing any crimes, but they're choosing to do otherwise. So until we change who is leading the White House and other places, we're going to continue to get these results. So that's why I remind folks, you may not think voting makes a difference. It does. And being civically engaged does make a difference. It complements what we're attempting to do when we hit the wall in terms of our enforcement.
By the way, if you didn't read what Scalise said to get this woman out, he said you should consider all the circumstances, which
That's
is
right.
exactly
Yeah.
what normal people
Right.
say.
My point
about
is
everybody.
that he was a powerful Republican,
Yeah.
and a powerful Republican is able to get this done. And by the way, she was from New Orleans. She was in Louisiana.
He's Louisiana.
Well, I hope
Steve-
more folks will step up
Yeah.
when they look at, and I would just say, because I am really concerned, in addition to the harm on residents' rights and our rights, including due process, which everyone, if they take away due process or the 14th Amendment, pick the amendment you like, they can take away that too. The president doesn't have the power to do that. So if you just stand idly by and we allow that, you should be concerned. But in addition to that, I'm concerned about our economy. So I've been attaching myself to various economists to learn more about the impacts on our economy here, short and long term, and it's astounding. But one of the things I learned recently is the folks who come here, the immigrants who come here, yes, you may get folks who perpetuate crime. In my office, we go after those folks for trafficking guns and weapons, and we hold them accountable. We don't go after folks who are looking to become a citizen, who are actively in an asylum process or some other application, who are committing no crime whatsoever, not on anyone's radar for any public safety issues, because we know we have limited resources. And so if the federal government's going to take those limited resources and just start rounding up immigrants, you should be concerned about, one, your due process rights, but also about our economy, because most of the folks who come here are coming to work.
Yeah.
2 or 3 jobs. They sustain our economy in ways that folks probably don't even really recognize, including our healthcare industry and healthcare institutions and higher ed institutions and so many more industries. Suddenly, we may not feel it now, but as more numbers come out in terms of jobs that can't be filled because we do not have immigrants or immigrants are living in fear, and you actually go for some services that you no longer have because immigrants are not showing up to work anymore or to school, then people, I think, will start to wake up. And I hope it doesn't have to get to such a dark place for people to understand the value of immigrants to Massachusetts and this country. Compared to the rest of the world, those coming here are coming with talent, they want to contribute, and are working really hard. And so the narrative we have to also push back, this idea that everyone's a criminal, is nonsense.
Stephen in Boston, you're on with the Attorney General, Andrea Joy Campbell. Welcome. Hi.
Stephen?
Stephen.
Hi.
Hi.
Yes, Jim and Roderick.
Hi.
Thank you for allowing me the opportunity to ask the question.
Of course.
Attorney General, my question has to do with the Uber and Lyft settlement.
Yes.
And I've been a driver in Boston on and off for about 10 years now. And I've been following the reforms that have been put in place based on the settlement. And everything's been going well, with the exception of the restitution for the payments. Back in January, I looked on your website, and it actually said restitution payments would be expected sometime in spring of 2025. I've called Russ Consulting just to follow up, trying to get some clarification. And every time I've called, 5 or 6 times, they're always pushing it back a few weeks. Can you give any clarification in terms of what's going on and when we can expect payments?
Very
you, Stephen.
soon. First of all, Stephen, thank you for the question, because it speaks to the other work we're doing that is not just Trump focused. We still have our jobs and other responsibilities, including making sure the settlement provisions for the Uber and Lyft settlement get to the drivers. So I want to say a couple of things on this. One, this settlement that we secured here in Massachusetts has not happened in any other state in the country. So I'm really proud of that. Now you have Uber and Lyft drivers that have a minimum wage of $33.48. Didn't happen anywhere in the country. They will receive sick leave, which is also a new paid family and medical leave as a part of the settlement, a health stipend, which they didn't have before, and this restitution. Drivers actually don't have to do anything in terms of receiving the restitution checks, Stephen. Where it took a little bit longer is just the calculations that went into this with Russ, who's our settlement administrator, as you know, to get to, and I'm not going to, take a while to do it on the radio, but to get to a point where we had to finalize what the payments amounts were, depending on how long folks were driving, et cetera. So checks will be going out soon. Drivers don't have to do anything. They will just receive that. So thank you for your patience, but this should be happening very soon. And if you want, you can follow up maybe in a week or so as we finalize this.
Stephen,
so thank you for your patience.
Attorney General, I think
But I will say, people in Massachusetts should be proud of that, because I think in some of the noise that is making everyone depressed, including the death in Texas right now, which is horrific, right? Massachusetts continues to lead, not just on the lawsuit front, NIH funding and all the other lawsuits. We also are leading on the other proactive work to protect drivers or workers who are fighting for a livable wage, and we are the leader of that. So we may not be New York or California, but we punch above our weight. And I've been saying this every day, I feel like Muhammad Ali. We're punching above our weight every day, and that's something that should make everyone proud to live in this state and be a part of this state.
A lot of texts, not surprisingly. It's something we discuss with you
Uber
every
and Lyft?
month.
No,
What?
on Uber and Lyft?
No. I'll just pick one. Stephen Newberry, I just tuned in. Has the AG already discussed working with the state auditor regarding the auditor's desire, that's
No,
wrong.
it's
not
what I
desire,
said in the
it's
last
the law
one.
to conduct an audit of the legislature. Where are we?
The same place we were before.
Which, for those who weren't listening last month, in one sentence, where are we?
Nothing's changed. We continue to go back and forth with the auditor on just the scope of what she wants
You
to
know,
audit.
I have a new tact on this, if I may, just briefly.
I have a new issue.
Okay, fine, you can do this. Beyond you saying you're not getting what you need from the auditor saying we're giving you in the legislature, she's told us everything you need and then some. Regardless of who's right in that situation, you or Auditor DiZoglio, this is the law of Massachusetts. It's a law like any law passed by the legislature. This happened to be passed by 71% of the voters. Isn't one of your responsibility to ensure that the laws of the state are enforced?
Absolutely.
This is not being enforced.
Absolutely. So where I disagree, and the auditor knows this because we made it crystal clear even before we approved the ballot, that our ridiculous and I would say stupid process, and I think it was done, no offense to the men listening or in this room, by a whole bunch of men, when they designed the
We
ballot
don't take any offense
process,
at that at all. Go ahead.
And literally, you actually, when you're going through to approve whether or not something should go to the ballot and to the voters to actually vote on, you actually don't determine at the outset, at the beginning, whether or not it is constitutional.
That is correct.
Which is ridiculous.
That's the Constitution.
So we're wasting at times people's time because you pass something like the ballot question. Then you have to go back and do a constitutional analysis, hence this back and forth with the auditor. And this is not personal. I understand where the auditor is coming from around transparency, accountability. We were just talking about that in the context of the Supreme Court. Folks in the state legislature, greater transparency, et cetera. We are for that. But at the end of the day, the court will ask us, well, what are you attempting to audit? Because there are certain authorities the auditor has in terms of auditing the legislature, and certain authorities she does not. So this was happening at the same time we told her, one, your audit of the legislature, it can't be done in a certain way, and at the same time we had the ballot question. So that's the evaluation. Post that ballot question, in order to enforce it, we have to know what is the scope of the audit.
Why don't you just tell her what she can do and what she can't do?
So
forget what she says. Why don't you?
Because that's not my job. So when we represent the state agencies, I don't just represent the auditor. I represent every state agency.
So this standoff, if you never get what you want from the auditor, we could go 4 years from the people having voted for this overwhelmingly.
Not necessarily.
And nothing happens.
Not necessarily. We could at some point possibly have to remove my office and everyone get their own lawyers to do it. But we don't do that lightly because you usually do that in a very extreme circumstances. It is very rare
How
that
would
you
you
would do
feel
that.
if you were one of the 70? You were one of the 71% of the voters who voted
At
yes.
the end of the-
You told us. How would you feel if you're an average person who is one of the 71% and doesn't understand all the legalese between you and DiZoglio and saying, I don't
would be
understand this.
frustrated.
I voted for this. Why isn't this happening?
I would be frustrated. I always say what frustrates me about government is how much money and time we waste not helping people. So in this case, we're not wasting time. We had a back and forth, and we have for a long time, where it's changed over time in conversations with the auditor and her team. And not to discount, these are public workers. But we need certain information. And if you don't get that,
when was the
or it's
last
a back
time you
and
two
forth,
communicated with each other?
I feel like it's been a little while since I've seen her in person.
Okay.
And I will say it's not for it's any animosity. It's frankly because we don't know what's going to come from the Trump administration. I feel like just when I get off this radio, who knows what happened in D.C. that immediately requires our response to that, or frankly, someone randomly picked up by ICE where we then have to mobilize to help. So
Okay.
I'm not
And
discounting
we get the
it.
CNN on here. Every time we turn around, it's another disaster. It's unbelievable. You can't concentrate. So this is something, and Jim can follow up on this question too, because Jody from Canton wants to know what's happening with ex-CEO of Steward Healthcare, Ralph DeLatorre. Are you going to indict him? I feel like the Attorney General and the Governor are evasive about this. Many people lost their jobs. People died because
Agreed.
of him. Hospitals closed. I feel like it's out of sight, out of mind. People are clawing back, trying to claw back
Steward
money
is trying to claw back
from-
money itself
from
in the
him.
bankruptcy court.
But that,
It's
but
not
that,
out of sight or out of mind. And I
Okay.
actually appreciate who was this.
this is
a-
Jody from Canton.
Jody, I appreciate you lifting this up, Jody. It is not. Even if I go by the Kearney, which is now closed, it makes it front and center. There used to be an emergency room there that I used to live next to that isn't there anymore. People have lost their jobs or had to go elsewhere. We take the health responsibilities that we have very seriously, but to do an investigation, and I know some people are reading it through the media, it takes time, and that is what we are undertaking. So I can't talk about it while it's ongoing, but it's ongoing. I mean, you're talking about interviews of witnesses. You're talking about reviewing documents. If anything, having to actually put more team members on this is important, while also balancing the work of this accountability, which we have not forgotten, and also what's coming from the Trump administration in terms of healthcare cuts, et cetera. It's a lot, but it has not been lost. At least for my office, it's front and center for sure.
There's a criminal
And we will-
investigation going on?
And we will circle back on our investigation when we are able to talk about it publicly. I will come back here once we get to a conclusion where I can share it, but I
But
can't
there's
right
a
now.
criminal investigation going
There
on?
is we are currently investigating. That's all I can say.
Okay. Andy in New Bedford, you're on with the Attorney
And
General?
to Jody's point, not forgotten. I know people have lost their lives and jobs. And frankly, even before I took office, we're dealing with this for years. Hence some legislative fixes that are needed here too.
For people to know, the only government entity that is criminally indicted, DeLatorre, and is number 2 from Brookline is Malta. Nobody in the United States has gone after this guy
And I will
criminally.
say, one
disgrace.
complication here,
Yeah.
and we'll see in other cases too, is before this administration, we had federal agencies that we worked with collaboratively
very
on
good
these
point.
cases, including Medicaid fraud cases, elder abuse cases, the U.S. Attorney. We had a working relationship with the U.S. Attorney's Office and others. That doesn't exist. And that makes it more difficult, especially if the federal laws are stronger than the state laws to hold people accountable. So another serious impact of the lack of collaboration between the federal
Have you ever talked
administration
to the
and
U.S.
state.
Attorney about
I have.
Steward? About Steward?
Well, I can't say with Steward. When she got the role and responsibility, welcomed her to that new role that she has, and said we want to continue to collaborate, not just on this, on a whole host of matters. But that becomes more challenging if they're directing all their resources to the immigration fear-mongering we're seeing, or pulling away from certain cases that need accountability.
Andy in New Bedford, you're on with the Attorney General. Hi.
Andy?
Andy.
Good morning.
Hi.
Good morning.
Can you hear me? Great.
Perfectly.
Attorney General, my name is Andy Pollack. I'm president of the board of the South Coast LGBT Network. And on January 17, 2023, we had an incursion of the NSC 131 at a drag story hour in the library in Taunton.
Yes.
Yes. I was wondering how that's proceeding. It was quite traumatic for us, and since then we've been doing quite a lot to provide our own security. So,
Andy, what would be helpful is if you could actually stay on, because it is specific, and in terms of the additional security and other ways that we might be able to be helpful in real time as you're doing this. But the lawsuit, so, to make it clear to the public, we filed a lawsuit against them. The neo-Nazi group, sadly, started here in Massachusetts. We often don't want to lift that up because it's not something we should be proud about. And because of our lawsuit against them, New Hampshire, which has a Republican AG, followed suit and filed as well because of the patrolling of neighborhoods, the targeting of folks in the LGBTQ plus community, the interference of just everyone's civil rights. They filed a lawsuit too. That is progressing, and we've won some milestones along the way when they've tried to dismiss the lawsuit, which is positive for us, and I think makes it crystal clear that we're going to take on hate organizations that are violating the rights of our residents, and most importantly, stand up for the LGBTQ plus community, which continues to be under threat even by the federal administration. So Andy, please stay on. We can give you some other updates, but also maybe have a conversation or other ways we might be helpful to you and what you're doing in New Bedford and the surrounding communities.
And if you stay on hold, one of our
Yep.
producers will get your contact info and give it to the Attorney General. Thank you for your call.
Here's someone that sounds like they could use some help. This is Verena from Dartmouth. She says, my question concerns about 10 years that my mother worked for the town of Weymouth, but they have no record of her employment, so she isn't getting any credit for her years there in her Social Security payment. She's 88 and retired.
She's young and fabulous.
Yeah, young and fabulous.
Verena. Okay.
And also, after you work for a city or state city for 10 years, don't you get a pension in Massachusetts? I think you do.
Right,
Maybe
you get
she's
vested. There's a lot of benefits that come.
Maybe
So
she's
can
losing out on
Verena,
Verena from Dartmouth.
I would love her to connect with
you know
Martin,
what,
who's
Verena,
here from my team.
if you can text back with your phone number or a way to reach you. We don't have. Do we have their phone numbers? We do have
she's
their
willing,
phone numbers.
okay.
Yeah,
We
maybe
can
we can
follow up.
get the phone number from here.
We'll
Yes,
share
we're
it.
getting the phone number from here,
Yeah,
Verena.
because Martin
so-
can follow up. We can follow
Okay.
up with Verena. We can also connect with Andy as well.
Okay, thank you. We have the phone number. Thank you.
Thank you.
We're going to Joanne in West Roxbury, who's on with the AG.
Joanne.
Hey, Joanne.
Oh, hello.
Hi.
Thank you for taking my call.
Of course.
And I'll just say quickly about the cell phone issue. I
Yeah.
taught in Boston Public Schools for my career.
Yep.
And I'll tell you, I think they're a great distraction.
You're right.
And as I was teaching, and when kids were going on to like MySpace or whatever it was, they were
MySpace.
constantly distracted by media. They were constantly distracted by video games,
Got it.
special ed.
Hey, Joanne, we're running
Hey,
out
Joanne,
of time.
things
I
have
don't mean
moved
to
on.
be
Hey,
disrespectful.
Now they're watching porn. That's what the texters are telling me.
My question is
Thank you,
about,
Joanne, for that.
Thank
I
you,
was
Marjorie, for that.
compromised in the Harvard Pilgrim data security incident. I had that happened, I no longer had Harvard Pilgrim as my insurer, and I
Hey,
thought
Joanne, I have bad news for you. Your connection's horrible. What we're going to do is put you on hold. None of us can understand what you're saying. It's not your fault. We'll put you on hold, get your contact info, and
Well,
will you
yeah,
reach out?
Joanne, yeah, we'll follow
It's
up.
around she said to the call screener, she's affected by Harvard Pilgrim's data breach. Should she enter a class action? Is that advisable?
Won't you stay
on
on the
hold,
line? Yes.
Joanne. Sorry about that, but we just
And I
couldn't make
appreciate
out
the
what you were saying.
commentary from Joanne. I mean, this is why the Teachers Association and others, so many are supporting the Study Act because, to your point, trying to enforce cell phones and just have that engagement with the student, they don't have time for it, and it also can quickly become confrontational. And so they'd rather not do it. And I
Yeah.
think right now you see inconsistency where one school district may have, only for certain periods of time you can have your cell phone, and other periods you can't, which also creates a lot of confusion for educators.
So we only have 2 minutes left, but there was a
Okay.
story in the Globe that put Marjorie and me both over the edge, and you're involved in this, I think, on the right side. RMV will not renew your license if it turns out you got a lot of tickets, and you can't work out a payment plan, apparently, under the law. You can't ask for some hardship kind of thing. But the story in the Globe went on to say the current law does say if you've been found guilty of drunk driving or you're a habitual traffic offender, you can get hardship exemptions. Like, you're looking at me like, I think you're quoted. Am I not right about this? Is someone, maybe not. In any case, is there any, let me ask you straight up, is there any reason that someone should be denied a license or not even given a payment plan opportunity if the only a sin they have committed is unpaid tolls or tickets? Can take away their livelihood.
The Attorney General's in here.
Oh, you are in the story.
Yes.
Let me look into this.
Well, you did look into it.
No,
You're in the story.
no,
What does it say in the story?
It says Julian Sear, Cape Democrat, pushing a bill limiting
Julian
the registry's
Sear.
authority to impose
What's it
things
say
on
about
driver's
her?
license. Well, I'm getting to that. And physical
Okay.
registrations triggered by state taxes in certain files. The bill, which is backed by State Attorney General Andrea Campbell,
That's you, by the way.
will let drivers
You
seek
know
to have
that.
their
Okay,
fees
fine.
waived or reduced based on financial hardship, and direct the
So-
registry to send bill payment
You have 30
reminders by
seconds.
email.
So now this makes sense. You said
Sorry.
Julian Sears
Yes.
bill. So
Sorry,
I was like, I thought
sorry.
it was like a constituent
My
case. I'm
fault.
like, wait a minute.
Go ahead.
Yes, I support Senator Sears' efforts and bill here because, to your point, similar to our just debt collection work, as we're trying to help people grow their wealth. We don't think people should go to jail, which you can happen in Massachusetts for debt, carrying debt, and we don't think that people should lose their livelihood or driver's license without. If they have an opportunity to be able to repay that back. So it seems to me like it's a common sense bill, but it's not us taking the lead, it's the senator taking the lead in ways to help people.
So here's the follow-up final question.
Yeah.
how old will your grandchildren be when the legislature deals with this issue?
I can't.
Sorry.
First of all, I want to thank Senator Sear because he was also helpful in addition to this bill, the Study Act, which now this makes sense. I was like, what driver's license case? Who's doing what?
Attorney General,
but
we're
it might
thrilled to
take a
see you.
long time. But I don't think it's going to take that long.
Not if you get
let's hope
involved.
it- yeah.
I have to say, though,
Quickly.
I want to thank the legislature because obviously with the budget that just happened, that we just got a significant increase to help with some of this federal
great.
accountability
Great.
work, which
Great,
is
great.
really important. People are working hard. But in the midst of everything, it's just a reminder to folks, sometimes you got to just turn off the news. You just have to turn things off and just be present
That's
with
right.
yourself and your family and your friends. It's a hard time right now, including what's happening in Texas. So take care of yourself, and I hope people find moments to enjoy the summer, their friends and their family. It's really important. But thanks for having me as
Beautifully
always.
Thank
said.
you,
Great to
Attorney
see you.
General.
Thank you.
Thanks so much, Attorney General.